Hello, hello. All right, I think we are online and ready to go. Let's have a look. Is there anyone already here in the chat? Hey, how's it going? First of all, guys, before we get started, there's some renovations going on the flat next door, so there's a pretty noisy environment today, unfortunately. I'll do my best to try to minimize it, but if it's too much, I might have to finish early. So let me know, guys, if you can hear the noise. It's pretty bad, but hopefully this having the microphone next to my head in this format might help. Hey, Derek. Chilling spree. Cool. All right, so noise is not too bad for you guys. That's a good thing. Alrighty. So for today, I have no plan. I have no anything in particular, really. I just have a couple of tools and processes that I would like to show you. Just something else, something different from the usual stream. So I think what I like to do is kind of like a creature that lives within a jar, or not like lives, kind of like preserved in some kind of like brine or alcohol or something. Just like an organic creature, not like humanoid or anything, just a blob of things within a jar. And the idea is just to show a couple of techniques that hopefully you guys might find useful. So let me bring. I have a few references, nothing special, not too many either. So I'm using PureRef obviously for this. Also, let me bring in Epic Pen. So yeah, I have a few references, just trying to get the mood of like the type of thing that I like to get. So have a look at this. How crazy this is. I mean, the photograph is fantastic, but I guess what I'm trying to do is going to be a mix of all of these things, or try to get some of the forms from all of these things together, like this mantis, like this sort of thing maybe for the body and the head, but then I'm gonna combine it with some creepy things like the legs of this. Is this a spider? Well, this arachnid. These type of forms and shapes. That's the idea, really. And I kind of like this. This is quite gross, so I want to add some of those things. But yeah, that sort of gives you an idea of where I'm heading with today's stream. Nothing, like I said, I don't have any design or anything, so we're gonna just do it as we go, and hopefully answer some questions if you guys have. Just feel free to put them in the chat, of course. How do you use your two-way brushes? The double action brushes, I guess you're referring to, West. Depending on what surface you're using it, but the double action brushes basically tap into the settings. Let me just show you. So in the brush palette, they all have different settings and different values. Some of them have certain things activated. Some of them have certain things activated, but some of the other things are kind of like null. But the double action brushes, some of them tap into this pressure slider as well as these smooth. So these are like automatic settings that are applied when you do a stroke. So essentially, when you use the double action brushes, depending on how much pressure you put on the stroke, will smooth it. It will smooth the stroke more, or if you do it faster. So I guess I'll show you. I can show you later on. This is when I get something started, so that we have an idea of where to go with today's stream. But that's essentially it. You depending on how fast you do your strokes, or depending how much pressure you applied, that's going to change the smoothness. Yeah, I'll show you. It's not. So let's see. Maybe one of the screen brushes might be good. So this is a pack that is available in the ZBrush Guides website as well. Oh, by the way, I'm currently, if you're experiencing some issues with the ZBrush Guides website, like database errors or something like that, just give it a second, because I'm in the process of migrating some things and optimizing a few things, just because it was getting too heavy in terms of like the images and everything. So I'm optimizing it so that it runs, it loads a little bit faster, and you guys can access it a little bit easier, because I know it is quite slow. So if you find that error, just keep that in mind and just come back later. Yeah, so let's see. I'm gonna use this Skinport double action brush. So you see in the name of the brush, I have this DA. Yeah. So DA stands for double action, and again, this is something that I just made up. It doesn't relate to anything in ZBrush. I just thought, you know, just to try to categorize those. That's what I call it, double action. Hey Berg, how's it going, mate? So yeah, essentially, I'm gonna subdivide this a couple more times. So when I go ahead and do this, you see I'm just adding pores. But if I press harder, it's just gonna increase the spread of those pores and the spread of the alpha that is being used by this brush, at the same time that it smooths things out. Right? So if I just do, let's do one on the side, same pressure, right? So this is just doing or trying to maintain the same pressure with the double action brush. It's almost like the, you know, like you would expect in, I don't know, in Photoshop to change the diameter of the brush based on the pressure in a way, but on top of that you have the spread of the alpha, and you have the smoothness of it. So that's this is an example of using this double action brush with a consistent consistent pressure. But then if you do the same thing but add pressure here and there, you see how the alpha kind of like rotates. And at the same time, the more you press, the more that the previous stroke gets smoothed, and the new pores and the new details are, you know, more evident. So hopefully you can see the difference between just a normal, what you would expect from most brushes, let's say, that behaving this way with the double action. So hopefully that clears that question. I'm gonna go ahead and undo all of this, and I'm gonna get started. Of course, if you have questions about the process, feel free to put them in the chat. It helps to make directional pores. Well, there are brushes specifically for directional pores, but the one that I show you, yes, you could totally do that as well. That one is more for like this part of the face, like the cheek area. But there are other ones that are precisely for directional pores. Can you tell me what constitutes the bulk of your work? You're mainly concept artist, creating still images. You also create models for games and film. Also, thanks. No worries. Yeah. That, to be honest, that's what I feel more comfortable doing, and what I like to do the most. Concept art. More specifically, character concept art. I do a few environments and props and things like that, but I mainly work on characters. And in fact, most of my freelance work recently has been on, you know, taking the whole thing to production. So I do the concept, the client approves the concept, and then I also take that on board and create the, you know, the retopology, the animation ready model. I don't do the rigging. I'm totally clueless when it comes to rig. I can set up something quickly for testing the formations, which is sometimes important when you have to deal with you know, with a client's, well, with something that is going to end up in production for animation. But other than that, I don't do any rigging, and then I just take all the way to, you know, UV mapping and baking if it's needed for games and that sort of thing. So yeah, so a little bit of both. I would say the bulk of my work, I think more than, I'd say 70 or 80% is focusing on teaching and training. And sometimes I do a bit of consultancy in like smaller studios and help them set up like pipelines and that sort of thing. But that's not too much. But yeah, it's focusing on teaching. That's why I run the ZBrush Guides website, the 3D Concept Artist website. I have the Extra Mile course that it's, by the way, we just finished a student contest and it's fantastic. I'll share some stuff with you guys later today. But the rest, when I do personal work, is mostly character concept art, and when I do freelance lately, it's been more production stuff. So yeah, a bit of everything really, fortunately. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start it, and then hopefully I can answer some of those questions as well as we go, but we need to have something on screen. So yeah, I'm gonna start with ZSpheres, and that's part of the technique that I wanna show you. So I'm gonna start with symmetry, and once we set up kind of like a base, I'm gonna move to an asymmetric process of sculpting. So this is going to be the body. One thing I would suggest is if you're doing like a character, a humanoid character, or yeah, anything that you want to start with a ZSphere, and you want to have a central point of the character, let's say like the belly or the hips or something like that, you would probably, or that's what I would recommend. You saw that this is my first, like the root of this ZSphere chain. These would be the hips, right, or the center point if it is not a humanoid character. And from here you start going to the torso, and then for the hips and the legs, right? Well, more than the hips, this could actually be the belly, and this is more the hips, right? And from here you can do another one here for the leg and another one for the other side, you know, that sort of thing. But the idea is that if you start with this ZSphere here, you'll see, hopefully, let's do it on here, this point is sort of like creating this joint in a way, this ZSphere joint like that, and then the other one is going to start like this, right? If you don't do that, if you just start with one at the bottom, then the direction of your chain is always going to be this way, and that could create some issues or unwanted results when you create the adaptive skin, especially if you don't want to use Dynamesh. But we're going to get to that, hopefully. So just wanted to clarify. That's why I start with one in the middle and then create one at the top and one at the bottom, and then start spreading the rest of the armature. I'm not going to make the entire thing. I just want to have something to start with. And you'll see why. This is the equivalent to start with a, you know, with just a Dynamesh sphere in, yeah, just start with a Dynamesh sphere and then move on to the next stage, which is Dynameshing, probably with a higher resolution, and start sculpting. But all I want to do right now is to have a starting point. And if again, I don't have a design in mind, so we're just going to design as we sculpt. But if I were to have an idea, let's say this initial state is going to be just a small portion, and then I'm going to have kind of like a twisting sort of tail, maybe with some creepy things sticking out, maybe some tubes or filaments or some kind of, I don't know, we'll see. And then maybe some long, skinny, weird arms coming out like that, and you know, so it's gonna be like way bigger than this in terms of length, probably. This is just to get us started, right? All right, cool. Hi Pablo, the macro menu, you have tray left and tray right left work for me, but right showed up error script is the same for you. Huh. Not sure which one you mean. Oh, these ones? You mean to toggle them on and off? I never used that before. I didn't even realize they were there. I just double click these arrows and close them if I need to. To be fair, this is a custom UI that is probably a bit more, a bit overwhelming, but most of my time I just work like this. I closed everything. If I'm working, you know, on my own, this is how I work. And then I have most of the tools that I use, I can access them from these palettes. And the palettes appear wherever I put the mouse. So if I'm working like here, I just enable that. Just you know, to edit mesh, deforming, texture, blah blah blah, or anything related with brushes and creating brushes and editing brushes. So I don't use that. Sorry. The tool to taking notes. This one is called Epic Pen. All right. So now that I have this base, what I'm going to do is go to the Sketch or the ZSketch tab, right? And this only is available, this palette is only available if you actually have a ZSphere selected, right? So you won't be able to see this palette if you have a ZSphere or a polymesh or anything like that. It's only with ZSpheres. So the idea here is that you can edit the mesh, and as soon as you click edit mesh, you'll see that everything changes a little bit, like the shading. And now instead of using the tool to create a ZSphere, right, what we end up with is these sketching tools, right? So there's just a few sketching brushes. So we have armature, this bulge, sketch 1, sketch 2. The difference between these two, I think it is just in the depth of the inserted mesh. Then we have smooth, that is going to smooth everything kind of like linearly. This second smooth, that's going to smooth out just the point or the area of the ZSphere or the sketch ZSphere that's going to, I'll explain this in a bit if you haven't used it before. There's just basically different types of smoothing, but it's pretty simple, and you can work with symmetry. Essentially, you can just start drawing, and you'll see it basically creates this sketch that is neither a mesh, neither a ZSphere. It's just a ZSketch. It's another thing, but it's only available with ZSpheres. Now, once you have this, you can hold the Shift key and access these smooth brushes that I just showed you. Any of these four. At the moment is smooth 1, and you can smooth this thing out. But you see the smoothing is different than any other mesh. It's basically like when you smooth this thing, it's kind of like how can I put it? It's like attaching. When you smooth these things, they're trying to wrap around the ZSphere in a way. So the ZSketch wraps around the ZSphere the more you smooth it. That's kind of like a good way to think about it. You see, it's kind of like trying to get closer, and you can be very precise about this. So let's go ahead and reduce the brush size. And I'm gonna try to start thinking about some shapes that could work. And this is a great tool to block things, right? Because it's very, very quick, and it also works with pressure. So the more you press, the bigger the ZSpheres. This is a good example, actually, of what I was saying of how these things smooth. So with the normal smooth, you probably expect that ZBrush is going to either reduce the volume or whatever you're smoothing, or if you press the Alt key when you're smoothing, it's actually going to inflate it. In this case, what's happening, it's kind of like a spread, and this is kind of like an important thing to understand, so that you have more control of what you're doing, really. So let's assume that I don't know, this thing here is what we just did with the ZSpheres, and that this pink thing is the smooth. So if we have something like that, which is the stroke of the ZSketch, if we use the smooth brush, what ZBrush is going to do is take whatever we did with the ZSketch, and then it's going to spread it to wrap around the ZSphere in a way. Of course, the volume is going to be reduced as well. But roughly speaking, that's what is happening. It's not the usual smooth, and it's important to sort of like understand that a little bit so that you know what to expect when you do these type of things. So pay attention to what happens here at the top. So I'm going to start smoothing. See how this is spreading, right? So the more that I smooth this, the more that these things are going to spread and combine with the others, right? So that's, hopefully that makes sense. All right. So I'm going to do a few of these ones, and then I'm going to show you a couple more tricks with this. In fact, if you want to do muscles with this, and this is a trick that a friend of mine, Papstein, probably you know of him. So I stole it from him, but it is fantastic. So if you can actually add, sketching with color. So if I take, let's say this, let me see if I can remember how I set it up. Let's set a white color to the sketch, and then a red color just to do the next stroke. So if I do this, right, it's basically going to add that ZSketch with painting, but because the base is white, when I smooth, it's going to actually smooth and create this sort of like cartilage type of thing, because it's going to also smooth into the color that is underneath the thing. So this is a great way to create this type of like muscle systems and all that. And this is a trick that, yeah, Kurt showed me. All right. So let's say if I take this, fill it with white, just so that it's kind of like a more cartilage thing. Then take a red color. And then when I smooth, it looks kind of like, yeah, muscles. But it's pretty cool. So the reason I wanted to show you this is not just because the organic nature of this process, but also because if you want to do like a humanoid character, right, you can simply set up a very simple armature with ZSpheres, and then jump into this mode and actually develop the muscles. In fact, just very quickly, if you go to projects, probably, I think it's in projects or tools, maybe. Or maybe not. Oh yeah. So if you go to the ZSketch, so these ones are elements done that come with ZBrush that are done with the technique that I'm showing you. So this one, this facial Ty Shelton, sorry, facial anatomy, that's done with this technique. So if you want to explore that as well, but so yeah, you can potentially just use this technique to create the muscles of the anatomy, and then you can convert it into a sculpting mesh, which is what we're gonna do later today. I just want to show you some more techniques with the ZSketch, because it is a pretty powerful technique. Now, I guess let's do one here, and I can hold Shift, change the smooth to smooth 2, and you'll see the difference. This one is going to smooth. It's less. The smoothing will propagate less throughout the stroke, and is concentrated more towards the end or the beginning of this stroke. So there's just a few different smooth tools to try out. I mostly use the smooth 1 really, or the smooth 2. Smooth 1 or smooth 4. But play around with those and see what works. All right, so that is just using the simple sketch 1. Now sketch 2, I think is just a slightly hang on. Yeah, sketch 2 allows you to sort of get out of the mesh a little bit more. So with the sketch 1, you can also do it, but it will try to stay closer to the geometry, I believe. There's some subtle differences. I'm not entirely sure what the difference between the two are. I think it's the way that it's just placed on the mesh. But the one that I want to show you is this armature. So the armature is really cool because you can use it as imagine a curved tube. So you can do these sort of things, and then of course smooth that out. So this one is the one that I would probably use to set up muscle, like I don't know, the bicep. So imagine that this is the bone here. You can just do this and then smooth it so that it will attach to it. So you see, even though I'm gonna undo that, even though that these are, you know, relatively far apart, and this is clearly a new stroke, if I smooth this, ZBrush is gonna try to sort of like attach it to the next thing, and that's what I was sort of like mentioning before. That is, it's a different smoothing mechanism. It feels like it's smoothing, but it's actually, you know, helping you sculpt. Oh no, I think my tablet went. This is getting very annoying. Hang on. I'm gonna reset the tablet. In the meantime, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll have a look in a second. Hola Raúl, ¿qué tal? John Quest. That's fair enough. Thanks so much, mate. Glad you like what we're doing here. Hey Nayan. Alex. How you doing, man? 5130. We have a couple of extra milers here. I saw Berg earlier and Alex. All right. Oh, Javier is also here. All right. We're back. We're back in business. Yeah, so yeah, this is a simple but useful way to create some interesting stuff. So I'm gonna do a couple more just to try to figure out the design. At this stage, again, the focus is on the focus is on the forms and how they all relate to each other. It's kind of like blocking, but more organically, and you know, it feels like you're already setting up some details, but that's roughly what this is. And of course, this won't get thinner, and maybe this is another way to understand it, the what's happening behind the scenes. So the more that I smooth this is not gonna get thinner, like the size of the actual ZSketch or the stroke is not gonna get thinner. What it's going to do is basically spread those iterations or those instances of that brush in a way. So if you think about this as, you know, a series of spheres connected in a way, like that, when you smooth, what you're actually doing is kind of like spreading those apart a little bit. Hopefully that makes sense. So the actual thickness won't change. It's just going to spread, and if you connect this, like they say that this is the base, and then you have a smaller one here, right? So when you smooth this as well, what ZBrush is going to try to do is take this original size and try to blend it nicely with spheres that are kind of like bigger with the other, you know, kind of like in between, roughly. That's the idea. So If I want to change the thickness of this, I will wait until I have the sketch, and then we can use the sculpting tools to do that. Hey William, thanks for tuning in. Can do some kind of like limbs here to start with, and maybe a couple more. This is kind of like what the mantis would have, I guess. And this looks like eyes, but that's not what I want. Let's switch to the sketch 1. But you see, this is a pretty relaxing thing to do as well. And one of the things that I really like about this process is that you can build on top of what you create. So as you do these sketches, like I have in this part right here, that is my new armature in a way. So I can just go on top of this one, and I can spread, or yeah, let's call it a spread rather than a smooth. I can spread that new stroke in that new armature. So I can build that with new muscles if I wanted to. Although these are not just muscles, they're just, we're building things up. All right, so let's do something here for the bottom part, and then we move on with other techniques that are also pretty cool. And also I need to show you how to convert this into an actual mesh that we can work with. Okay, I think I want to spread this. Let's see. I'm going to use armature. The thing is, I don't want to have too many things that are symmetrical, because when I start sculpting, I'm going to try to stay away from that. Okay, I'm going to do something like this. Just because I want to show you something else. You can also take the move brush, right? Or the rotation and all that, and you can affect or edit this mesh. So that's another way to, even if I, yeah, I'll show you this. So if I spread this like this, you'll see there are just a bunch of spheres, right? And when I smooth them, the ZBrush is going to try to change the distance between them. That's really what is happening here. Anyway, I just wanted to do that extra piece in here, because you can use something like the armature, which I already have selected, with a smaller brush size, and you can sort of fill in those areas like this. Obviously you can change the camera as you do it so that it works, and then when you smooth it, it's kind of like filling those gaps, and that works really well to create kind of like wings and that sort of meshes. Alright, so let's leave that one there. What's the other thing? Oh yeah, so there's another one called bulge, which we can use here, and it's essentially like an inflate. Maybe here at the top. So yeah, what this is doing is inflating that stroke, but remember, this is not like the usual things, the usual sketch. What it's doing is just gradually inflate. Where you click on is gradually inflating that sphere and then spreading that inflation to the other spheres that are part of the ZSketch. So yeah, I'm gonna do this just to inflate some parts in here. something like that. You can also, let's say that I want to make this a bit more pointy straight away before I go into the mesh. You can hold the Alt key and you can deflate as well. I rarely use that tool to deflate things, but I just thought I'd mention it so that you know that the tools that you have here with the ZSketch are actually pretty familiar, and they, what you learn when you do these things, they translate nicely with the, to the rest of the tools in ZBrush. So it makes sense. So if you use the Alt key is just to modify it. So for example, here we can go ahead and hold the Alt key just for that sort of joint, and then maybe add a little bit more there. All of this is going to change quite a bit, but let's leave it as it is. All right. So that's the the beginning of our creature. So you see, it's pretty quick to do something organic. So if you click on Edit Mesh or get out of the Edit Mesh, that basically removes what you had in the ZSketch and just leaves the ZSphere, but you can just come back and edit it at any time, right? You can also show like this dotted version, this dotted version of what the sketch is just by doing this, and you can also optimize it. So if you're starting to get, if you use like too many strokes that are too small, you can optimize it, and I'm not entirely sure what the process is, but it just simplifies the mesh, and you can keep working with a large number of these tools, right? So you can just optimize it like that. The other thing is, if you go to Unified Skin or Adaptive Skin, the difference between these two is that the Unified Skin is going to actually take whatever you did in the sketch alone and create a new tool. The Adaptive Skin is going to adapt to the ZSphere itself. So in other words, if I just click on Make Unified Skin, right now I have a resolution of Dynamesh of 128. Let's do a quick preview. So that looks all right. Just trying to find, there might be some holes. Actually, there's not. So if there was an area that wasn't covered with the sketch, with the ZSphere, these would have shown you kind of like holes, but in this case, didn't. So that's good. So let's increase the resolution a little bit, even a little bit more. Let's go for 300. Nice rounded number. I think it was fine. 250. All right, so that's good. So this preview allows you to just play around with the resolution of that sketch before you commit to create it. So I'm going to click on Unified Skin, and that creates a new mesh in here. And this is just basically a Dynamesh already that you can play around with. And this is one of the cool things about this process, that every single stroke that you create with a ZSketch comes with its own polygroup. And even when you smooth it with the other parts, like you see here, every one of these, it's a different polygroup. So I'm going to take advantage of that in just a second, and I'll show you why I'm planning to do with this. Again, just to try to give you a few different techniques, but I'm going to just give it a white color so you can see better what's happening in here. Let's have a look at the chat. Hey Dark you Adam, I think. You do Blender tuts? Blender. No, I don't do Blender tutorials purely because I'm not an expert. I don't feel that I'm there yet to be able to showcase anything of relevance, because I know whatever I do in Blender could be done a little bit easier if someone has a bit more knowledge than me. But I've been playing around with it and learning it quite a bit. In fact, for my students at the Extra Mile, I'm planning to release a new addition to the course about Blender, like rendering with Eve and cycles. So I've been learning it for that purpose alone. But no, I don't have any tutorials. Like I said, there's so many things online that if you want something specific, I'm sure you can find it in there. Cool. Awesome. All right. So where were we? Yeah. Oh yeah. So let's go back to this mesh. You can isolate pieces, right? So Control and Shift and click. You can isolate pieces like that. Just want to go to the ZSphere. Hang on. Right. So this big sphere that you can see here, that is the actual ZSphere. Well, in this case, it worked. But what I was going to say is, if you get out of the ZSketch, right, you see as soon as I click and to go outside of this ZSketch, the adaptive skin becomes available. So this is essentially the same thing. It's just that it is for the actual ZSphere. So you have different ways to go about it. In fact, you don't have to create something like I did here with a sort of kind of like a form before you start sketching. You can just have a single ZSphere and then start sketching from there. And you can just use the armature. So you can start with just a ZSphere. Click on Edit Sketch. Let's enable symmetry. And you can use the armature. And then just, you know, hang on. Oh no, oh no. Well, you should be able to do it. That's that's an error, but you should be able to do it. I'll do it again. All right, let me just restart ZBrush. Hopefully we won't lose what we have. I'll be back in just a second. Alrighty, so let's give it another go. So ZSphere, maybe this is something that is not gonna work, but it should work. It should work. So if you go to ZSketch, Edit Sketch, Symmetry, I'm gonna use the same tool, Armature. Maybe that's just too big. So I can do, oops, ZSketch. So here are the legs. Here are the arms of the creature, and then you can of course build it up like that, and you know, start smoothing. And remember that the smoothing is kind of like a way to blend things together. This looks weird, but you know, this is what I mean. You can play with these straight away. You don't have to build something with the ZSphere. It's just gonna be easier, because the whole point of the ZSketch is that once you draw, like I've been saying, once you draw a stroke, then that stroke is gonna try to blend or spread across whatever is underneath, either another stroke of the ZSketch or the ZSphere. So if you have a simple armature, let's just do another one. So we're gonna go back to the creature in just a second, but I think this is, you know, if you're not familiar with this tool, it's pretty cool. So this is the normal ZSphere. let's just create, let's do a quick setup for a character, for example. And I'll just show you what I would do to actually use this ZSketch. So this is just normal ZSpheres, nothing out of the ordinary here. We can set up like an A pose type of thing. So you can think about this kind of like setting it up as like if you've done any clay sculpting, right? If Raul's still here, he knows what I'm talking about because he taught me this. So yeah, if you've done any like character design or anything with clay, so you create the armature first, like the wireframe and all that. And then you can start building the rest. So let's do a couple more. I'm not gonna do the hands or anything like that, but Santiago Mateo. Yes, I was born in Colombia. Actually, I lived in Colombia for about a long time, in fact. So I think I moved when I was 15, 14. But most of my family is still there. My parents and my sister. I have just one sibling. They're in Costa Rica. That's where we moved when I was like 14, 15. My dad was working for a multinational that had a branch there, so they just moved him. So I moved with him, of course, and with the rest of the family, even though I was a rebellious teenager. I didn't have the means to say no. But yeah, and then I moved to Australia. So like I would say I'm 33 now, so almost like a third of my life was in Colombia, a third of my life in Costa Rica, and a third of my life in Australia. So it's kind of like funny that way. All right. ZSphere is like the wireframe before clay. Yeah, exactly. Cool. So let's say that this is the wireframe, right? The next stage before you actually add clay would be to utilize any material. I remember using what's the name? Escaped my mind. Aluminum foil. And you take that aluminum foil and then just wraps it around to add volume so that you don't waste as much clay. And depending on the clay that you're using, it is good to have it as aluminum so that you can bake it, for example. So once you have this, you can just go to ZSketch and we can select the armature and we can add things like this, right? So this could be the beginning of that pectoral muscle, for example, or this sort of thing. When I use the ZSketch, so this ZSketch in this instance, in this specific example, I would use it to just create volumes quickly. And then I would move into, once I have the ZSketch, to add the other pieces of clay. So this is kind of like the aluminum foil, just to add more volume. That's really what I'm trying to do here. But it becomes, once you get used to some of the things on how this thing works, it becomes a very intuitive process. And you can vary the size of the brushes, of course. And it looks pretty blobby at the moment, but that's that's part of the process, and that's what this tool can be used for. You can be very precise. I'm just doing this extremely fast. but yeah, you can be more precise than this, right? And then it says let's say you're happy with this, you convert it into a unified skin, maybe a bit more than that. Yep, unified skin. And then here is your unified skin, which you can polish. I'm gonna unify this. This is too big. And just like that, you have a starting point to work on your mesh, regardless of what you're trying to do. Just practice anatomy or just setting up a base mesh, right? Just to work with something else. This guy doesn't have any neck. And it's a good practice as well, just to do this type of sketches. All right, I think you get the idea, right? Let's go to to the idea of today. Oops, the idea of what I wanted to do today. All right, so this is what we have now. I'm gonna go ahead and start like smoothing things out and you know, working on top of these volumes to just refine it a little bit. But I'm gonna start using the tools that or the polygroups that we have, just to separate things. And again, I want to start working on kind of like a more organic sculpture that is very dynamic. I don't want to work on a T-pose and then pose it. That's not going to be the end result. As I don't necessarily want to have something perfect that I can bake things on or anything. This is going to be a concept sculpt. So what we can do is we can go to, let's go ahead and select the select rectangular shape. Cool. Let me just check the chat. Oh, thanks, Matt. Glad you like it. It's one of the standard color schemes of the program you can toggle between. I don't know if that's a question, but no, I just made it up. I just make the orange more orange, and Pixologic, the original one, is more like yellow. And the slider. These colors are actually the colors, like my colors in a, like my brand colors in a way, like the ZBrush guides and the 3D concept artists. So the orange is that orange that I use in the websites, and the green is kind of like the secondary color as well. So like if I bring in my ZBrush guides, you'll see what I mean. So this is the ZBrush guides website. So this is the green that I use for the UI, and the orange that I use for the UI. That's why. Nothing. For no other reason than that, just to be consistent. By the way, if you haven't seen it, there's a tutorial that I released last week that is pretty cool. It's on creating stylized hand-painted texture for PBR material in ZBrush, and this is what I was talking about at the beginning. So because I'm in the process of migrating things, you might find this error. Just give it a second. Hopefully it would come back. If not, at some point it will. So don't worry too much about that. All right, where were we? So I'm gonna go ahead and split these arms so that I can work on them separately, and all of these pieces, so that is gonna be more comfortable. So the next step in this case is to think what would be the easiest way to work in terms of like workflow and you know, split things into parts. So I'm gonna isolate these ones. I'm gonna split hidden, right? So now I have two different subtools. I'm going to do the same thing with these pieces right here. I'm also going to go into solo mode. Just like that. So invert that. Oops. And I think that should work. Just thinking maybe this one as well, make it part of it. Let's separate that. All right, split hidden. I'm gonna split these ones as well. Split hidden. Split hidden. Split hidden. And also, before you ask, you saw me doing a lot of splitting here, and coming back to the subtool palette. So the splitting happens within my custom UI, and the splitting, you can get that, well, the split button, you can get that from the split subpalette here. This is split hidden, and you have a bunch of other ones. And what I mentioned at the beginning, that I usually work like this, even with this palette selected, closed. So I can do what I just did there, or splitting things, and the selection of the subtools, you can do it from the N. Let me just put that here, from the N key on your keyboard. So if I'm working on this, and to do exactly the same process that I did before, if I want to just hide certain areas, let's say do this and then split it, and then I want to go to my subtool palette, instead of bringing the palette or anything like that, I just press the N and select something else. So that's why, with the tools that I have, the way that I set up my UI, it allows me to work like this without any distractions. Anyway, I think I just saw it. The ZBrush website went back on. So this is what I mean. If you go into the website right now, you might encounter that error. Just leave it there for a little bit and come back later on. Hopefully, at some point today or tomorrow, we'll finish the migration and updating it so that you can actually browse a little bit faster. I don't know if it's gonna get me the same error again. But the idea is just to optimize a little bit. There we go. So now it's working. So you see, it just loads everything a little bit faster. So yeah, this is a tutorial on how to hand painted or how to create these hand painted textures and to produce this type of result with PBR. So you can these are renders from Marmoset, but it's all done in ZBrush and using Substance Alchemist to create some of the maps. Anyway, just thought I'd share it. Also, if you are part of my list, I send an email with the link. If you're not part of the email list, you can subscribe from the ZBrush Guides website or the 3D Concept 3D Concept Artist website. And I generally speaking, I send like tips and tricks like what I'm showing you today, like in a written format every week. And also, if you're interested in something like the Extra Mile course, which is what I teach, I would let you know next time that it opens for enrollment through email, so it's a little bit easier. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention that. Alrighty, so what I'm going to move on and do now is convert this to Dynameshes, because right now they're just open mesh. So I can just click Dynamesh, so to all of them. You can set a macro for this as well, but I'm just gonna do it manually. There are not that many anyway. Right? So now all of these pieces are Dynameshed. So I can go ahead and I'm gonna use the smooth brush and the inflate brush just to close those gaps. That is pretty much it. Whoops. I forgot to do it on both sides. I didn't have symmetry enabled, but it's not a big deal. You can just basically mirror that and then mirror and weld it again. So it will mirror from left to right, from positive to negative or negative to positive. So just need to keep that in mind. So if you basically, let me undo that. So if I mirror and weld right now, I'm just gonna mirror the left hand side to the right hand side, but I actually want what I just did on this side. So that's why I mirror first and then mirror and weld. That's the reason there. All right. Let's do the same thing with these tiny arms. Just gonna inflate, mirror and weld. Let's work with symmetry here. Same thing here. I just want to close those and have something a bit, you know, more decent to work with. Whoops. Just a few more. And the reason I'm using the inflate brush is just so that, you know, we don't have those weird things happening around the borders. Oh no, I think I'm gonna lose my tablet again. Oh, yep. All right. This is like a never-ending thing for me. Every time that there's an update for Windows, and I try to block it, but it's just annoying. Let's reset the Wacom tablet again. And I can answer some questions in the meantime. Hey Chris, how you doing? I never really understood splitting polys. Yeah, so splitting polygons is one of your best tools in ZBrush. So I reckon for me, if I were to choose one, like let's say you had to remove everything from ZBrush and like every other tool, and you could only have one feature left. Of course, it wouldn't work, but just hypothetically, I would just keep the subtools because they're just phenomenal. You can have as many polygons as your system can handle on each subtool. So let's say that my my computer, you know, start to hang on, let me see. I think, yeah, okay, we're back in business. So let's say that my computer can only handle a certain amount of polygons, like I don't know, 8 million polygons or 10 million polygons. I can have a mesh or a tool that has, you know, 100 million polygons. It's going to be pretty heavy, but I can do that and I can work with that if I split the 100 polygons in subtools, in essentially 10 subtools that have 10 million polygons each. So that is super handy. And not only that, but what I'm doing right now, which is, you know, working or setting up this so that I can work a little bit better. So in terms of workflow, subtools are your friend. And that is the reason, generally speaking, that you would, I mean, there are other processes, of course, but this is one of the reasons why you would split the polygroups or the polygons and work with different subtools so that it just makes it easier. So we roughly have the same thing, but I can just, you know, if I want to enable solo, sorry, I can go to dynamic. This is another really cool thing, that if you have a heavy mesh, something that is, you know, comprised of like lots of polygons, and you want to be able to see it to be able to judge the overall shape and the silhouette and that sort of thing, you don't have to, let's say, select this antennas type of thing, go into solo mode, work on these ones a little bit. Let's just move to something like that, right? You can do whatever you need to do. Then get out a little bit of that, or just zoom out, turn off solo, and just see the effect that you had. And I mean, you can do that, but I much prefer to have this always on, and that's why this dynamic is there. I don't know if you've ever used that, but it's super handy. So instead of enabling solo, there's a tiny little text here on top of the switch called dynamic. I don't know if you can see that in the recording, but it's called dynamic or dynamic solo. And what this feature does is, if you enable it, so by clicking on it on just the text, it becomes like a bit white, or yeah, it doesn't look like it's grayed out anyway. So that is enabled, and you don't have to toggle solo on and off. And that basically means that I can hold the Alt key, select my base, right? And as soon as I start rotating, I go into solo mode and I let go, and everything comes back. So I can just move like this, right? And I can go to, you know, let's go to my personalized clay brush, which is just a a personal version or a custom version of that clay brush, and I can start working on things like this and just refine those volumes. And when I move around, that's when I am in solo. And the reason this is so good and so so useful in terms of workflow is purely because ZBrush doesn't have to calculate all of those things every time that you move. So right now, because I'm not rotating the camera, we are essentially editing a pixel. Right? So that's the concept, obviously, of ZBrush for anyone that it is relatively new to ZBrush. Right now, all I'm doing is editing that pixel. It's not a pixel, it's just a pixel, because I'm not moving the camera. And that pixel is just a pixel that, that has material information, obviously depth information. That's why it looks like I'm actually affecting the volumes. And it has orientation. It has all the information that we need to create a sculpt, right? But it's a pixel. As soon as I rotate this, it's like ZBrush is picking up those pixels and applying them to that the actual mesh. This is just I'm trying to explain it in a different way. So it's just picking up that from the canvas. It's applying those pixels and the information that you did from that view to the mesh. And then when you drop it again, when you let go and you're not moving the camera, you're back in pixel mode again. So what that means is that if you have a bunch of tools permanently on, when you rotate everything at once, ZBrush is going to try to calculate that every single time. So in other words, if you bring in the, like, if I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, there's some like some user interface for the performance of your machine. I don't know how that is called, like I don't know, like NVIDIA thing, and you can see the performance of your processor, right? ZBrush doesn't care about the how amazing your graphic card is, as long as you have a good processor, like a CPU, that is going to be good enough for ZBrush. So if you can bring in something like that, just to see the performance of your CPU when you're working with ZBrush, and you have the static camera, you'll see a pretty consistent flat, flat line. And as soon as you rotate, that's when the spike happens in a way. So that's what I'm trying to explain. That right now what I'm doing is purely working on pixels, and that's really the beauty of ZBrush, and why it's hard to compare it with anything else, because we have millions of polygons that we can edit at once, and then when you rotate, that's when ZBrush recalculates that and sort of applies those changes to the mesh. But yeah, that's really the beauty of it. I don't know if that's too confusing, but just thought I'd mention. And that's the reason I just sidetracked a little bit, branched out a little bit and went on a rant. But basically that's what the dynamic solo does. So it allows me to have everything on, and when I rotate, which is when ZBrush calculates things pretty heavily, then it automatically sends these to solo mode, and then I can work with all of my tools at once. So yeah, just a couple of workflow tips in there. Just keep in mind that if you're recording though, and this is another thing, or another reason why I try to not use it as much, but when I'm doing tutorials, because if you do if you speed up a video using solo mode, you're gonna see this flickering like this happening a lot, and it's really, really, really annoying. So be careful about that. All right, I'm gonna dynamesh this. Oops. There we go. I actually like this weird looking piece in here, so I'm gonna take advantage of that. But yeah, the process right now is just about refining the volumes a little bit. The definition of it, of the entire mesh, and the actual let's call it the anatomy of this creature. I'm gonna work on that a little bit more once I am in asymmetry mode. Not asymmetry mode, but basically when I'm not working symmetrically. That's what I'm trying to say. Hang on a second. I see some activity on the chat. Cool. Is it professional to include online courses on your resume? Yeah, I would say so. Any course, anything that you do. At the end of the day, the resume is just a more, the way that I see it, a resume is, I'm just trying to think about a correct way to put this, but it's kind of like a backup from your portfolio in our industry, I think. So ultimately, someone that is hiring you just wants to see that you can do the work. That's all there is. So no matter how many things you have in your CV or in your resume, what is going to probably get you the job is that your portfolio, right? Like that you show that you can do the job. So I would put a lot more emphasis and focus on that, and that's, for example, that's the entire idea of the extra mile as well, the course that I teach. The focus is in producing like good looking images following certain processes that will allow you to demonstrate that you can do and achieve certain things, rather than say, hey, I was in the extra mile, because that really doesn't say much, you know. I don't know if that makes any sense, and hopefully it's not gonna upset anyone. Where in Australia are you? In Brisbane. I'm in Melbourne, so I'm currently in a heavy lockdown. We have a curfew and everything right now. Javier, nice one. Cool. Has it worked for you? I've been seriously thinking about getting into some courses myself. That's literally incredible. That was one issue for a beginner. Cool. Awesome. Very helpful. Blah, blah, blah. Yes. I see what you're saying about the pixels being picked up. It's like ZBrush is allowing you to move around the mesh smoothly with so many polys to give you more frames. Well, it's just basically working like using the technology that ZBrush was made built around the pixel recently. Hey Roger, thanks. Glad you like the normal lecture. What's the best tablet for ZBrush? I get this question all the time, but I try to avoid it because I always say that I'm totally biased. I would always say Wacom, unfortunately, and I know that is yeah, that's not great, but that's what I've been using all my life, and I have not a single word, a bad word to say about it, other than sometimes with the updates it just crashes, but that's, you know, the least of my problems really. It's a fantastic tool. And I have a really good relation with Wacom Australia, and they always bring me in to test products, and that's why I'm saying it's very biased. Whatever I say about Wacom, I always suggest Wacoms. But you know, the other ones I'm pretty sure like they do the job as well. I would say whatever tool, whatever Wacom or Huion or whatever tablet you use, is just a tool. So it doesn't matter which one you use as long as you use a tablet, I reckon. Because doing this type of things with a mouse is, I wouldn't even try it. But yeah, any tablet would do. You know, getting a more expensive device, let's say a Wacom over Huion, I don't think that's necessarily, you know, it's gonna make you a better artist if that's what you're concerned about. You know, like if I don't get a Wacom or something like that, would stop me from creating really awesome work. That's not the case at all. I think it's just the way that you use the tool, right? but any tablet would do. The reason why I prefer Wacom, and especially the Cintiq, is because it's just the fidelity and the responsiveness and the general build of it. I feel it's a lot more sturdy and useful. So yeah, again, I'm totally biased, so don't necessarily take my word for it. This is just what I use, but any tablet would do. I don't wanna box you into getting only Wacom stuff. Cool. You can also disable that flickering thing by disabling dynamic solo button, right? Yeah, well, that's the dynamic, really. So if I turn this off, there's no more flickering, but every time that I rotate the camera, ZBrush is bringing up, like taking all those pixels back and applying them to the mesh. So you are experiencing a heavy lifting of on the system. So that is why having dynamic on really helps. Although for a tutorial, for instance, or in this case, I understand that it would be quite frustrating to watch, that flickering happening. But the flickering is just me rotating. So as soon as I rotate the camera, ZBrush does that process, and that's why it looks like it's flickering. So I'm gonna turn it off. But in most cases, I would have it on, especially when I get to have a lot of polygons. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna leave it on. Just because it is going to be easier on the system, and hopefully that's not going to break things too much. Alright, I'm going to use the move brush with, actually, let's use the move elastic with AccuCurve. Move elastic, AccuCurve. And the move elastic just allows you to play with these things a lot more, and because it has the AccuCurve, it sort of like makes it a bit more pointy. All right. Need to dynamesh a few of these things. All right, so I think we are ready to start like morphing this into a more interesting pose slash shape. You can get out of this dynamic now so that you don't get annoyed. And I'm not sure about like certain things, but all of these might change as we move, because we haven't done the tail or the whatever thing we want to create for the bottom. Just checking the time. We still have about 40 minutes, so I reckon we can definitely start posing and moving things around with this guy. Let's see. Make sense. Apply geometry HD to a mesh for skin details. Hey Nayan, I think you've asked this a couple of times before. I'm not gonna get into HD geometry because there's no point right now to do that. But HD geometry works in the same way as subdivision. So you have, I'll explain this in a second. I go into a lot more depth in the course because it is something that you can use in a specific workflow. But let's say you have a plane like this, right? And this is just a normal plane, and then you subdivide it. Then ZBrush is going to take every single plane and is going to subdivide it like that, right? So that's first level of subdivision. Let's say you do it another time. So ZBrush is going to subdivide everything again, right? So this is subdivision level 3, right? Or 2. You have 2 levels of subdivision in this case. And then you can just simply go to HD geometry, just here, right? at any point, right, you have 3 subdivision level, and then you just click on Divide HD. When you click Divide HD, ZSphere is going to do a virtual subdivision of the polygons, so you won't be able to see the HD happening in real time. So and the reason why it's happening, it has to do with what I mentioned, what I've been talking about picking up the model, working with pixels, and then applying it to the model. So the Divide HD is going to do that virtual subdivision, and you can just go like mental. You can go for 50 million polygons if you want, and it's going to be exactly the same thing. You're going to have this same type of subdivision, Cadmon, Clark, blah 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 blah. So this is going to become like super dense if I do a few of these Divide HD. The thing is that you won't be able to see it until you access Divide HD, and the way that you do that is by pressing A on your keyboard, and it's going to be based on the brush size, or in the not the brush size, but in like a, you're going to have like a tunnel vision in a way. So that's what I'm saying. It's a different concept, but I'm not gonna have time to explain it because we're not adding HD geometry to this. But once you have a few subdivisions, just clicking on this to add as many subdivisions as you want, then you're gonna have sculpt HD subdivision here. So essentially, in the normal subdivision, you say you have subdivision level 3, and that shows, I don't know, 1 million polygon. Let's call it 1 million polygons, right? And then here you'll have 3 or 4 or 5 subdivision, whatever, and then that is going to be called HD subdivision 5 or whatever, and then you're going to have 50 million polygons or something. I don't know. Of course, the math doesn't work, but I'm just using it as an example. So you're going to have this HD subdivision, and if you want to sculpt the details in HD, then you have to hover your mouse over the area that you want to work on, and ZSphere is going to create a projection, like a tunnel vision, a projection of that area. And when you press A, so you hover over the area, press A, and ZSphere is going to create an area like that. And the size of the area is also based on how many polygons ZSphere can handle at one given time. So it's going to kind of like crop that piece, and then you can work on HD geometry. That's why it's not a good idea necessarily to work on with symmetry in HD, because it's based on the camera. And then you just press A again and get out of the HD, and then you will see, you'll see the subdivision, the normal subdivision, but those details that you added in HD are still in there. Anyway, hopefully that gives an idea. I'm going to try to move a little bit fast and answer some of the questions here. Cintiq is Wacom, yes. So the current one that I'm using is a Cintiq from Wacom. Cintiq or Intuos are better. So the difference between a Cintiq or any other tablet is the type of tablet, right? So this is a Cintiq that you can actually draw or sculpt directly on the screen, and that for me makes a big difference. But I've been using an Intuos, which is just a normal tablet that you sculpt and see it on screen, but you cannot sculpt directly on screen, and I use that for ages. Cool. All right. So yeah, let's go ahead and start thinking about what this creature could look like. So I think what I'll do is split the arms as well. Let's get out of symmetry, of course. Split hidden. Split hidden. Oops. And probably this one as well. No, this one. Is it this one? Yeah. Split hidden. All right, so now I have a bunch of subtools that we can work with. So even though this is not, is not an optimized mesh, right? It's relatively heavy for a posing, it's a lot better to just have something that has less polygons, and the topology works a bit better for posing. But at this stage, all I want is just to twist it a little bit and work on work on a few things so that I can work on that concept. So let me see if I can explain this a little bit better. So just for in this case, and I want to keep all my subtools, I want to use a plugin called the Transpose Master. So here we have Transpose Master. Click T-pose to mesh, and so it's going to take everything, convert it into a single mesh that we can edit. So now everything is a single mesh. We keep all the polygroups, of course, that we set up, and now we can go ahead and start posing this creature. So I can use deformers. So let's center this here, and I can use something like twist, just to twist everything around, or just to give it a tiny bit of twist. Of course, we're gonna deform things a little bit, but it's not a big deal. Let's accept that. We can use something. I'm just gonna show you a few different things. We can use, where is it? I always lose it. Let's use bend arc, and we can just do this sort of thing, maybe from the side as well. We can also use this bend curve, but the bend curve is something that I want to show you with a few other things. But let's set a few points here and then give it some rotation. Just try to be careful because we're moving, we're affecting everything, so just destroying a little bit of the proportion of the limbs, but it's not a big deal because that's kind of like part of the creature anyway, just so it's not symmetrical. It's kind of like being developed in that jar. All right, so I'm gonna take, for example, this mesh, separate it. So just the normal Alt Shift and click on that. I'm gonna mask it, invert the selection, invert the mask, Control click on the canvas, bring in the gizmo, try to position that closer there, and yeah, so this is going to be kind of like one of the arms hanging here, which is fine. Oops. Then there is this other mode, in case you don't know this trick. This is pretty cool as well. You can rotate things the way that I just showed you. I'm going to use the mask lasso. And I can bring in the gizmo, center to the unmasked areas, and then hold the Alt key just to reposition my pivot. And you can reposition the rotation and all of that. So you can go ahead and do this, right? There's another way to do it, which is with the transpose line. So you can do this type of thing and then use the rotation, and you can press the Alt key and rotate it like this. So it's like different type of rotation, and it's going to do it based on this curve that is here on the brush palette. So if I change this curve to be like more sharper towards the end of this transpose line, let me see if I can show you. So if you imagine that profile, that curve profile, being from the root to the tip in a way, and I just change it to be very pointy there. Basically, roughly speaking, this is what's happening, because I change this, so the effect will happen less gradually in this area towards the tip, and I can just hold the Alt key and rotate it. In this case, it's not really working, but that's just another way to do it. I'm just gonna keep it simple and use the gizmo. It's just gonna be easier. But before the gizmo was introduced, that was kind of like one of the easiest ways to go about it. Another cool thing about this technique of using just the T-pose mesh, the Transpose Master, so the T-pose mesh is that you can have subdivision levels. So in other words, I could have, just create a retopology for this whole thing, and then just bring it into these pose with subdivisions, and it will just respect all of that. But that's not what I want. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this quickly. The process is the same, so I don't really need to talk much about it. So if you have any other questions about something else, I'm happy to take this time to answer them, because all of this is just a repetitive thing. And I'll see the chat in just a second. I see some activity there. And another thing, by the way, about this process, again, of the Transpose Master and all that, is that you can do sculpting, right? So you can use, any other brushes here to further sculpt your mesh, and it will be, translated. It's not just for posing. And another thing, for instance, is the formers will work. Hopefully this works. Let me see if I can show you that. Bend curve. The deformers would work based on the masking. However, sometimes depending on how it is set up, it's kind of like the transformation wouldn't happen necessarily in the best way, but sometimes it does work. So you can use the deformers only on the unmasked areas, and then we can use the gizmo in this case to reposition this. Or you can just keep it simple, and in this case there's a lot of geometry, but you could just use move tools. So with AccuCurve and just a large brush, let's go back to AccuCurve. So the processes that you use here to move or adjust the shapes are very flexible, totally up to you. All right, I think we are getting slightly off track here. I think that works. I'm just going to rotate this entire piece, which it could be the head. So mask that as well. Hang on, mask that. Just thinking what would be the actual. Yeah, let's do that as well, and then we can hold Control and click on the mask to blur it. Let's see if that works. Bring in the gizmo, center to the unmasked areas, reset the rotation. I'm gonna try to place this pivot like around the neck. Let's see if it doesn't break things too much. Yeah, it breaks things. So what I'll do is I'm gonna mask this entire thing, and these two pieces, and I'm going to rotate this slightly. There we go. And of course, now we have to invert that and adjust the position and the placement of these things. We can also use the move topological brush. So in this case that we have two pieces, so two separate pieces, but they're different topologies. There's no continuation of topology in there. We can use this move topological to very quickly adjust those pieces. And ZBrush is going to respect that topology based on the first thing that you click, on the first subtool that you click. Now these two pieces, they look a little bit off to me. What I can do is just use the smooth brush to make them a little bit thinner. And we're gonna get into sculptress mode for the last few minutes, last 20 minutes of this session today. I just wanna make sure that distortion is countered in a way. So after doing this deformation, this head looks a little bit off. So I'm just going to use the move brush to adjust it. I don't know if this is gonna, I mean, it looks like the head anyway, but it could be something else. And the shapes are alright, but I mean, this looks awful so far. I mean, there's no, it looks alright. It doesn't look great, but that's just part of the process. We are in the valley of the suck so far, but we can just you know, keep working and keep at it. Basically, that would eventually pay off. I think it's just a matter of keep going. And eventually what I can do is just like split this even more and duplicate pieces. But I think this is, as a starting point, this works. What I'll do is I'm going to rotate this a bit more. And I'm not entirely happy with these pieces here at the top, to be honest. I think they are not working, but, or as they are, they're not working. So I'm going to, and I just thought about something that I did, and it might have broken a few things. So you're not meant to do any dynameshing. I think I did a dynamesh. We'll see. You're not meant to change the topology regardless of what type of topology you have. So if you have dynamesh or you know, C modeler or whatever, the idea is not to change the topology. And if you do, then it won't work if you come back to the previous state. I'll show you what I mean. So of course, right now we're stretching the polygons quite a bit in here. And I could just, I'd be tempted to redynamesh all of that, for example. But if I do that, then it's just changing the topology and it's going to affect things a lot more. And we just won't be able to go back. So let's do that. Let's go back to T-pose to mesh. And ZBrush is going to take whatever we did and there we go. So this is what I mean. It just yeah, it's broke of what I is fine. So let me just reset my tablet again. Oh no, tablet is still good. So it's not a big deal. I just made a mistake. But what we can do, since we still have the polygroups, all we have to do really is go to the split palette and click on group split, and we're just gonna get all our pieces again because we have polygroups. Now in most cases this would work, the transfer, but in this case I made the mistake of the dynameshing pieces. So all right, cool. So we can continue editing this separately if we wanted to. Let's see the chat. Can I export ZBrush to Krita? Ooh, do you mean the mesh? No, Like you can. Oh, okay, hang on. Sorry, I'm just catching up with the chat. Yes, yeah. Thanks, Bearwolf. That's basically, you can use Krita to edit the maps. All right, cool. Which version of Keyshot do you prefer? I haven't used many different versions of Keyshot. I currently have Keyshot Pro 8, which is, it's a good one. It does the job. that's for me the main thing in most cases, or in most tools. If the tool works and it does the job, that's what I would use. But I haven't updated, to be honest. I potentially would. I just, I don't know if I don't know if I would update really. So all I'm doing right now is just use the knife brush that I have in the clay pack, which is something that I use not just for clay brushes, but just to define some pieces, some volumes a little bit, and then just to smooth on top of that. And that's just to help define some wrinkles and some volumes. Yeah, the reason I don't know if I'm updating Keyshot at all is because I think it's a bit expensive for my taste. I mean, it's a really, really awesome tool, and the fact that it's connected with ZBrush, it's super handy. So I probably use that, and I use that a lot as well to do my, quick tests and work in progress. Keyshot is something that I use quite a bit actually to produce passes and do compositing, and that is essentially how I teach it in the Extra Mile course. But other than that, I don't know if the features, the new features, justified me updating in a way. So what I have right now, Keyshot 8 Pro, it is absolutely fantastic, and it just does what I need. Having said that, I also have been using Maverick quite a bit, and it is an incredible little piece of software that produces really nice renders, and you have a lot of control over the light passes and all of that. And that is something else that I'm working on towards the course. So the next update that the extra milers are going to get, so for those of you who are still here, is going to be on Maverick rendering and Blender. So that's gonna be good. But that's just kind of like a more in-depth thing for the students, and we can do Q&As and stuff like that. But I will happily do a tutorial for the ZBrush Guide website as well on Maverick, just showing the process and how to transfer things from ZBrush to Maverick. So stay tuned for that. All right, cool. So let's work on these things a little bit more. I'm not sure about this wings thing again. I'm just gonna turn them off because they're annoying me now. And these pieces, they're actually not that bad. Let's just tweak them a bit. I think they work a lot better than just with the big pieces. Just the silhouette wasn't convincing me much. For example, in this case, if I don't want to move the initial point, I will just mask that bit, and it will just create kind of like a soft mask. Just want to move this around a bit with a large brush. Let's do the same thing here. I think these pieces, like, they make more sense than the big stuff that we had before. Yeah, but definitely, you know, we can go back in here and do something interesting with these areas that we had as they could be kind of like the scapula or something of this creature. Maybe we can extend this a bit more. So those are the type of design changes that I like to do on the fly. And if you've seen some of the previous streams, like the robot, for example, that robot head, you know, it changed quite a bit, and that's really what is happening here. Just making design changes as we go. So I'm gonna use the custom clay brush. Just gonna add some volume here so that it makes sense that this could be a part of the anatomy. And because I'm not working with symmetry, and I need to sort of like keep working on both sides simultaneously. You don't have to do it. This is just what I'm sort of used to do. I don't detail one entire thing and then go to the other side, for example. I try to keep it, you know, I try to evolve both sides in a way at the same time, and also just to remind me of what are the type of volumes that I'm working on. And that's just my preference. So for instance here, that I'm just refining this rounded shape for the face, I need to make sure that I also do the same thing on the other side. All right, so yeah, we're getting there. Let's go ahead, and to wrap up, we have 15 minutes. I'm gonna start building the rest, just to block out the bottom part and what I mentioned about like something more interesting. We can do this in a few ways. I'm gonna show you ZSpheres, which I already showed you that. Yeah, let me just think. Yeah, I'm gonna do ZSphere, and I'll check the question. Hopefully I'll answer those questions as I show you the rest of this technique. I'm gonna go ahead and save this. And I'm gonna select a ZSphere, which at the moment I have as this. I'm just thinking what would be the best way to show you what I want to show. I think a ZSphere would be best. Yeah, it's either that, or I guess I can show you both ways. Yeah, let's use the ZSphere. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn off symmetry. This is gonna be my root. This is gonna be the tail. Actually, I'm gonna copy, or not. all over the place now. Let's just append the ZSphere here. All right. So normal appending of the ZSphere. I was just thinking about different ways that I can show you this, but this is going to be a pretty straightforward one. So with the first ZSphere that I drew here, that's going to determine the length of that piece, so that tail maybe up to there and there. And then what I'll do is scale this to be the size that I'm planning to have. Maybe actually let's just scale it more than that. Remember that I'm sort of like designing as I go. I don't have a specific idea in mind. Could be kind of like a flat worm type of thing. Now the idea of this technique that I'm showing you would be the following. So this is going to be the end and it's going to be the root of that tail, right? Now just by placing the first and the second sphere, I can know exactly when to start and when to finish, and then I can just start using the draw tool. I can start adding different ZSpheres, and then I will be able to wrap things around like that. Right? Whatever that is. So this is on top. So I can make something kind of like a worm type of thing, but it's just going to be much easier if I have a starting point and an end point, because I then use the draw tool in the ZSphere, and I can just add a few points and then use the move brush, and you see the change in the size is gradual, right? Because I establish the size of the root and the size of the end. So whatever I do in between is just going to be an average between those two. How is the ZBrush Maverick pipeline comparable to Maya? Something like similar, or is it simple as Keyshot? It is as simple as Keyshot. I would say it's even simpler to get used to it, and the quality and the shaders and the way that it works in general is just a lot better. I think it's closer to Arnold in Maya than anything else. I don't use Maya, to be honest. Just I don't like it. A bad experience. That's not to say that it's not a great software. I mean, I think most people that say that don't like Maya is just because they don't really know necessarily how to use it, or they're used to doing something else. I just don't like it. It's just personal preference, really. It is a great tool, and I know it can be super useful. Sometimes I have to use it in production because that's what the client wants, and they need the files in Maya or whatever. But if I can, I will avoid it. So if the request at the final, if the client wants just an FBX as a final thing, I wouldn't do it in Maya. That is the thing. But just going back to the question, how it compares to other pipelines, I think it's just getting used to something else. It is really easy. It just has a button to send things from ZBrush, so you can export an FBX with vertex color, so with polypaint in ZBrush, and then import it with a single click, and it will bring everything, set up the shaders, everything ready for you. So in a way, it's kind of like using that, using the Keyshot, the ZBrush to Keyshot bridge, which is super handy, and that's why I use it to create this type of work in progress. But yeah, like anything really, and this is something that I like to do myself, and I do it often, which is basically, try different tools, see how they work for my workflow, for what I do. If they work, and if I think they can be, if they can improve or enhance what I do in some sort of way, or just because they're fun to use, I would use them. But I'm not married to any of those tools. I would say the only software that I kind of like have a special soft spot for is ZBrush, obviously. All right, so you see what I'm trying to do here is just this type of like weird worm tail. Maybe we can make it wrap around it a bit more. For that, we can just take it and move it this one like that. But the great thing about this process is that we just move tools, or move not tools, move ZSpheres, and then in the gaps in between, we just add new ones and refine. It's kind of like adding resolution as you go. Right, so something like that. Remember, this is going to be kind of like in a jar, so I'm just trying to think about, you know, the shape of it. With the rotate tool, we just ensure that whatever we rotate from the point that we do it is going to be rotate the rest of the hierarchy of the ZSpheres. So I don't know if something like this. And of course, we need to make sure that things are not intersecting. But this is a very quick and simple process once you get used to it. So now we have this floating thing. We can make it so that it just fits a bit more, or it's closer later on. Just looking at different ways. All right, I think that works. That works fine. I think it's a good silhouette. I can just keep like doing this for a long time, so I'm just gonna leave it there. We have about 2 minutes to wrap up, so I'm gonna show you just one more thing, or you know, let's just convert this into a mesh, set it all up as a starting point, as a blocking. So we do that from the adaptive skin, but I'm not going to use any Dynamesh. So if I click preview, that's what I get. Let's click adaptive skin. We can create a folder called OR for originals. Put that in there. Set that at the top. Hide it, and then I can bring in this piece. All right, and of course it comes with the geometry of the ZSpheres, and then what we can do is just a quick polish pass just by smoothing everything, especially on the corners. And maybe use the move brush without the AccuCurve. Maybe not the move brush, the move topological would work a lot better in this case, so that we would respect that topology. All right. Cool, so that's that's the weird thing already looking even more weirder. What I'll do is select the gizmo, make sure everything is, all the subtools are selected with this little icon, and I'm just going to rotate things a bit so that they're kind of like, I don't know, in a more central straight position, just to work a little bit better. The only reason I did that is just because when I rotate and I hold shift, I can snap to the different views, so like front view, side view, and I can see it a little bit better like this. That's the only reason I do that. But yeah, let's see if there's any last minute question. put in the chat, guys. Otherwise, I'm gonna wrap it up here. And next time we just work on some of those filaments, and I'll show you some techniques to work with like thin meshes and adding some details, and you know, we can make this look a lot more interesting than what it is right now. What is that ortho head on the corner? So you mean this guy here? That's just a custom cam view. Cool. All right. Yeah. So this is just a cam view. You can create your own cam view. Basically, whatever you have selected, you can have polygroups or polypaint. So this is kind of like what I did. I had polygroups and I polypainted it. And you can go to the preferences, cam view, and you can click on make cam view, and so it's going to take a series of images and convert that into your cam view. If you want to have that as a transparency, so if I move this over here, you see it's kind of like a just an image. If you want to have this transparent, you just need to have the background as black, and anything that's black, Zero is going to read it as transparency. If you want to have the rest of the, let's say, of this creature showing, or like showing the polygroups, you can just do a render. Although it's not gonna be great, but you can do that. So it's just gonna do the same thing based on the render. So you can have everything showing in that cam view. This is gonna look a little bit weird because the shadows are pure black as well, so that's gonna be transparent too. Just wanted to show you. You can disable shadows, for instance, if you want to have this type of thing. So it's kind of like rendering a turntable in a way, and you know, but just not from a single angle. So now I can go back to gray, and if I go here, you'll see it's transparent, but there are other areas that are transparent because of that shadow. So that's it. But I have a few custom ones, like, you know, these ones, and I can cycle through those. But I use this one quite a bit for referencing, you know, the muscles and stuff for the character. But you can create your own. Perfect. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Definitely, if you want to have a look at the latest ZBrush guide ZBrush guide tutorial or ZBrush guide, go to the ZBrush guide's website. But like I said, if you encounter this database error, just give it some time. Hopefully, it's gonna be better soon. All right, I'm gonna leave it here, guys. Have a good rest of the week, and I'll see you next time.